Hi there. So we're going to be looking in depth here at the concept of wildlife trafficking. So this is the illegal movement of wildlife, either entire animals or pieces of animals, through different countries for illegal purposes. So just to give kind of a little bit of a quote on the background here of what we're looking at, wildlife crime now ranks among trafficking in drugs, arms, and human beings in terms of profits. It is an economic crime often perpetuated by criminal syndicates operating in the most remote regions of our globalized world, exploiting local people and lax laws or enforcement for personal gain. So again, even though we don't tend to think of endangered animals being in a similar category here, this is the type of crime that we think about with basically like the war on drugs, running guns, and unfortunate situations where human beings are trafficked as well. It's very similar in terms of the way that these people operate and get money from this process. And again, there are other people in the countries of origin of these animals that are not being respected and end up falling into this type of practice, maybe out of desperation or maybe out of confusion for what's going on here. So it's important for us to be informed about this. So first of all, is there any legal wildlife trade? And I left the American alligator here for a reason. Basically, the short answer is yes. This graphic here from Traffic, an organization that looks at the basically sale of wildlife and talks about the possibility toward some practices with this being better, has quoted that there's at least 100 billion euros as the estimated value of legal wildlife trade in the EU alone. So again, if there are, again, I'll kind of short form this graphic so you don't have to look through every piece of it. But basically, if there are laws in place that help protect not only the people who are buying and selling these products, but also the animals from being over-harvested in their environment, this can help to make these practices a little bit easier in terms of making sure that it's being done in a sustainable way that doesn't cause animals to go extinct. And this kind of makes me think of practices here in North America when we start talking about the American alligator. This was a species that was almost wiped out in terms of the need for its skin, but as the species was starting to go extinct, alligator farming became more of a thing, and this species bounced back. Basically, there was an economic reason to try and save this species, and so people committed to it. So there are some cases where you may have things like that that help these animals, but again, it takes a lot of resources being put into preserving them. So from here on out in the video, we're going to be looking at the illegal wildlife trade. So why are these animals being poached? So we see African and Asian elephants here. And the main cause here is for ivory. So ivory is something that has traditionally been used a lot in art, but it has other applications as well and reasons why folks are trying to buy it up. Basically, the price of it has fluctuated a lot because people have tried to intervene more to help elephants. In 2010, the price per kilogram was about $750. It shot up to $2,100 in 2014 when there were more buyers, in particular many of them coming out of China. But also elephant populations were starting to drop. That was another reason why the price went up. But now that since 2017 there's been an ivory ban in China, it's dropped back down to about $730 per kilogram. And I'll bring up China a lot in this video. Please understand that this isn't talking about every single person in China or even so much about China as a country in general. There are people in China who object to these practices with exotic animals, but there are some people in China who buy these products. There are people in America who buy these products as well. So again, it's up to all of us to be informed about these things. But again, some of the major buyers, at least at this point in history, are from China. So some other countries that have been involved in the seizure of ivory, basically a lot of African countries, have made demonstrations about how they are against the poaching of elephants and the poaching to gain ivory by doing ivory burns, which is what we're seeing here in the lower corner. So why are these animals being poached? We've got a variety of reptiles here. We've got crocodilians, snakes, and lizards. In this case, it's mostly for leather products. If we think about handbags or shoes that are made out of reptile leather, again, usually tend to be more upscale products. It's usually kind of a status symbol thing. But be mindful about buying these types of products because if they are made with real reptile skins, they could be coming from an endangered species. Why are these animals being poached? So we're seeing a lot of big cats here. So leopards, as well as snow leopards, clouded leopards, tigers. Why are these big cats being poached in their environments? So again, in this case, we're looking a lot at skins in terms of either being used in clothing or for rugs, again, because of their body patterns being kind of decorative. But another big influence into why big cats are being taken out of the wild illegally is Eastern medicine. Again, a lot of cases where I bring up Eastern medicine in terms of animal products, these cures are rarely ever proven to be effective, but they are something that's kind of rooted in tradition, and so it's hard to get some people to change their mind about their effectiveness. So the parts that are used in terms of Eastern medicine tend to be, and what this picture is indicating here, the penis and testes of male cats. So a lot of these are used in the Eastern market as far as a type of medicine. Okay, another animal that you may be less familiar with here is the pangolin. So why is this animal being poached? And part of it really has to do with its unique body covering here. So even though it's a mammal, it is covered in these scales. So these scales, again, are used a lot in Eastern medicine. This is actually from another ritual burning that was kind of done as a demonstration to show that the country of origin for these scales didn't want them falling into the hands of poachers. So again, this is kind of a positive thing. But again, these scales are often harvested for Eastern medicine. Sometimes they're disguised as instrument picks, like a guitar pick, to try and get them to be sold through legal channels. They have ever been used in kind of clothing and decorative items before, but that's a little bit less of a problem now. Another big problem with pangolins is that people eat them. So again, even though it's not food that we're used to, bushmeat is the term that's used for exotic animals that are being consumed by local people. Sometimes it's a more inexpensive form of food, but the markets in which these animals are held can also lead to some problems. When we've talked about the more recent COVID-19 issue, pangolins have been a possible vector for the virus, and again, it may have been passed around from them being in animal markets. The price for the pangolin scales in 2016 was $3,000 per kilogram, so pretty darn high. They are the second most trafficked mammal after human beings. Why are these animals being poached? So we've got some American bear species, the American black bear and the brown bear, and some Asian bear species as well. So the sloth bear, Asiatic black bear, and the sun bear. In this case, it's another Eastern medicine practice for bear bile. Basically, these bears are kept in confinement in these cages, and their bile is extracted from their bodies. So it makes it harder for them to live their lives, but again, the bile itself doesn't really have proven medicinal qualities as far as the benefit with them. Why are these animals being poached? We're looking at white rhino and black rhino in this case, our African rhino species. So in this case, it is for the horn. So just to clarify from the last part, even though African rhinos are kind of under more poaching scrutiny for this, there are Asian rhino species that are experiencing decline as well. So the horn for a rhino goes for about $65,000 per kilogram if we're looking at the figures from 2014. That is twice the value of gold during that time period, during that year. So why is it being utilized? So again, this is another one that's being used for Eastern medicine quite a bit. It's also used in the hilts of daggers. So again, for wealthy folks who want a rhino horn dagger, sometimes that's the contribution there. But most of it is for Eastern medicine. The thing about rhino horn, it's made out of keratin, so the same material as your fingernails. So again, there's no proven medicinal value for rhino horn, but it is being collected for that reason. Why are these animals being poached? We've got a variety here: baby orangutan, Asian small-clawed otter, leopard gecko, and an African gray parrot. The big thing here is looking at the pet trade. So again, these animals will be, in some cases, taken illegally from their native countries because people are interested in having them as pets. But there are problems that can arise with them. In particular, with parrots, usually they have a hard time if they don't have a mate, and oftentimes they may be dead in the conditions that they're trying to be transferred in. Things like otters and great apes are dangerous as they get older. So again, they can bite people, they can cause a lot of bodily harm to people, but people think they look cute when they're particularly young. but they become problematic as they get older. Certain reptiles like leopard geckos usually don't pose a lot of physical threat, but some of the areas that they're being taken from may not have great studies as to their population size there. Leopard geckos in particular are one that people are looking at more and saying, have we taken too many from the environment there? In the video clip, if you're looking at this on Google Classroom, this is a 911 call from a chimp attack in a person's house. It kind of gives an impression of how brutal they are when they do decide to attack somebody. Why are these animals being poached? We see a variety of turtles and at least one tortoise here. So again, the pet trade is another big factor for a lot of these endangered turtle species. Again, they're ones that their numbers aren't so great in the wild, so it'd be better to keep them in the wild. But turtle soup is another big factor. So again, for countries that still eat turtles as a main staple of their diet, again, it's not as bad if we're talking about turtles that have high populations, but for ones that are endangered, it's important to make sure that we're looking at this from a sustainability standpoint. Why are these animals being poached? So we're looking here at sturgeon. So these are a type of fish. The main thing is to make caviar. So these little orange orbs that you see here presented on these slices of bread, that's caviar. You've probably seen it before, or you may have seen similar fish eggs on other dishes. Caviar is something that is often talked about as far as being a really expensive food, but it is the eggs of these sturgeon fish. And again, sturgeon take a long time to mature and be able to create eggs. In some cases, sturgeon are farmed for their eggs, but in other cases, sturgeon are poached and the eggs are extracted quickly, and it's not a very sustainable model taking them from the wild. So we're hoping that farming practices increase for this species. Looking at this example here, why are these animals being poached? So we're looking at what we call the glass eel or elver stage of either the European eel or the Japanese eel. So why are these animals being poached? So the big thing with this life stage of the eel is that it's poached a lot for cuisine. The big problem is that they are being taken while they're juveniles, so they don't have a chance to fully grow up and to help contribute to being part of the breeding population to keep these species stable. So again, this is the thing that if you're looking at the younger form of eels where they are eaten, the fact that they're being eaten so frequently is making it harder for those species to bounce back. Wildlife trafficking is also not just limited to animals. The organizations that look at wildlife trafficking also talk about different types of plants. So for example, many trees are trafficked for timber and wood products. So we see a few examples of some trees there. So besides those types of products, there's also the possibility that plants are being taken from their native environment for decorative purposes, people who want to keep them in their homes. So again, this is a whole other point to consider with wildlife trafficking. So what can we do to protect these species that are threatened by wildlife trafficking? Legislation can protect endangered species. People caught trafficking have to pay fines or sometimes face jail time. So again, this is going to vary from country to country. And that's what's part of what makes this whole thing tricky, is that different countries have different laws. But the more laws that are passed to help protect endangered species in different countries, the better off they'll be. Breeding programs in zoos and parks can help provide new numbers for the species. So again, there's chances to help their numbers rebound and hopefully result in re-release into the wild. And finally, informed consumers can stop purchasing specialty items, causing them to lose value. If you're not buying these products that are made from poached animals, you stand a better chance of helping give these animals a better chance in terms of their survival in the wild. So that's it for this video about wildlife trafficking. I hope that this helped to explain some of the more current problems with wildlife trafficking, some of the things that it's important for us to know as consumers and folks who want to hopefully help species in the wild where they belong.